I always knew I was different. Ever since I was a child, I felt like an outsider among the people who shared my blood. Everything in my family revolved around the restaurant. From dinner table conversations to future plans that I was never asked about. But one thing was clear. I did not belong in that world. My name is Emma, and I was born into a family that owns a long-standing Italian restaurant in New York. My father, Richard, is a tough man, his voice always booming like thunder, running the restaurant with an iron fist. He doesn't believe in weakness. There is no room for hesitation or daydreaming in his world. My mother, Diane, is a strong, resourceful woman who stands by my father's side, managing everything from the staff to every single dish that leaves the kitchen. To her, family isn't just about blood. It's an empire she and my father built together. And then there's Ethan, my older brother, the golden child of the family. Since childhood, Ethan was destined to inherit the restaurant, and he embraced that role with absolute pride. He was the perfect copy of my father. Strong, decisive, ambitious. He loved the restaurant, loved running it, loved the recognition he got from our parents. And me? I was just an outsider. The daughter who was always treated as if she didn't quite belong. I didn't hate the restaurant. I liked the smell of freshly baked bread in the morning, the way the neatly set tables glowed under the warm golden lights. But I didn't love it the way my family did. I didn't enjoy spending my evenings helping in the kitchen, didn't care for the endless debates my parents had about expanding the menu, and I certainly didn't appreciate being constantly pressured to learn to love the business. I loved plants. I cherished quiet afternoons in the backyard, where I could lose myself in the refreshing greenery, running my fingers over soft leaves, feeling the peace they brought. I was fascinated by books on botany, landscape design, and how people could turn an empty patch of land into a thriving paradise. But no one in my family understood that. Every dinner was a silent battle. "Emma, you can't keep living with your head in the clouds," my mother said, slamming her fork down on the table. "You need to be realistic. You're part of this family. And that means you have a responsibility to the restaurant." My father nodded, his voice ringing with an authority that left no room for argument. "Ethan is ready to take over, but the restaurant needs you too, Emma. We're a family. You can't keep running away from this." Ethan smirked, his voice laced with mockery. "Don't bother, Dad. Emma cares more about her plants than she does about real work." I tightened my grip on my fork but said nothing. I was used to comments like that. There was only one person in my family who truly understood me. Grandma Margaret. She lived in a small house on the outskirts of town, where she had the most beautiful garden I had ever seen. She never forced me to be someone I wasn't. Whenever I visited, she would welcome me with open arms and a gentle smile. "Everything in this world has its own place," she once told me when I was little, her aged hands gliding over the lavender plants. "Plants, people, dreams. As long as you know where you belong, you will find your path." I had always held on to those words. But as I grew older, the pressure from my family only intensified. I couldn't avoid it forever. The time would come when I had to make a choice. Stay trapped in the cage my parents built for me, or find a way to break free. The problem was, I wasn't sure if I was ready. I always knew this moment would come, I just didn't expect it to come so soon. That evening, the air in the house was as thick as the grease in the restaurant's kitchen. I sat across from my parents, while Ethan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, watching with anticipation. Dinner went on as usual, but I knew what was coming next would change everything. My father set his knife down on his plate, his eyes locking onto mine. "Emma, have you given serious thought to your future?" I swallowed hard. This was it. Taking a deep breath, I clenched the napkin in my hands before looking up to meet his gaze. "I have, Dad. And I've made my decision. I won't be working at the restaurant. I want to study landscape design." Silence. A long, heavy silence that stretched longer than necessary. My father frowned as if he couldn't believe what he had just heard. Landscape. What? My mother set her fork down, concern flickering in her eyes. Ethan let out a dry chuckle, leaning forward as if he had just heard the worst joke ever. So, what? You're gonna make a living planting trees? I gritted my teeth. It's not just planting trees, Ethan. It's about transforming ordinary spaces into gardens, parks, and beautiful resorts. I love nature. I love the way people and greenery can coexist. That's what I want to do. My father's eyes darkened and he slammed his palm on the table, making the glasses rattle. Enough! His voice cut through the air like a blade, sharp and absolute. Do you seriously think this is a real career, a real job? Do you have any idea how many years this family has worked to build this restaurant? Do you know how many people would kill for the opportunity to inherit it? I clenched my fists. But I'm not one of them, Dad. I don't love the restaurant the way you and Ethan do. I can't spend my life in a place where I don't belong. Mom blinked anxiously but said nothing. Ethan, on the other hand, burst out laughing. Oh, Emma, you're so naive. Do you really think someone is going to pay you to play in the dirt and mess around with plants? Do you think you're going to be some famous garden designer one day? Anger boiled inside me. I don't need you to believe in me. I'll prove it. Dad crossed his arms, his eyes darkening. Then prove it on your own. I stared at him, waiting for him to say more. There's no way your mother and I are paying for you to chase this ridiculous dream. If you're rejecting this family, you're rejecting our support too. No tuition, no rent. His words fell like a sentence passed down in court. Mom turned away slightly, but she didn't protest. Ethan was still smirking, as if everything was going exactly how he expected. A sharp pain struck my chest, but I refused to let them see me break. I nodded, keeping my voice steady even as my hands trembled. Fine. I'll take care of myself. I stood up, pulled my chair away from the table, and walked off without looking back. I had no idea where I would go or how I would survive, but I knew one thing. I wasn't turning back. That night, I packed my things, trying to keep my tears from falling as each familiar item was quietly tucked away into my suitcase. As I zipped up my backpack, my phone buzzed. A message from Grandma Margaret. Come to my house, you'll always be welcome here. I took a deep breath. Maybe I wasn't completely alone. The next morning, I left my parents' house with a small suitcase and a lump in my throat. I didn't look back. There was no other way. I had chosen my own path. Grandma Margaret's house sat in the suburbs, about an hour's drive from the city. When I arrived, she was already waiting for me on the porch, her gentle face filled with understanding. No scolding, no unnecessary questions. She simply opened her arms and pulled me into a warm embrace. You're going to be okay, Emma, she whispered. I believe in you. Those simple words were the only validation I needed. Starting a new life without my parents' financial support was far from easy. I worked part-time at a small plant nursery to cover my expenses while focusing on my college applications. I wanted to study landscape design, but even after making my decision, fear still lingered. Was I good enough? Was I making a mistake? Then, the acceptance letter arrived. I did it. Walking onto campus for the first time felt like stepping into an entirely different world. No more the greasy scent of the restaurant, no more my parents' disapproving stares or Ethan's mocking tone. Here, everyone was passionate about something. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't alone. On my first morning, as I struggled to find my classroom, a voice called out behind me, "Move it, freshman." I turned just in time to catch a flash of fiery red curls, before a girl nearly barreled into me, almost knocking the papers out of my hands. Damn, sorry about that, she laughed, quickly steadying me. I'm Madison, second-year landscape design major. You're new, aren't you? Before I could answer, she grabbed my arm. Come on, walk with me. Don't just stand here like a lamppost, or you'll get eaten alive. Madison was like a whirlwind, pulling me into a world bursting with color and energy. She was passionate about plants, about every design, about every idea. Around her, I found myself feeling less anxious. The coursework wasn't easy. It required hours of study, from researching soil composition to sketching blueprints, from understanding ecosystems to applying artistic principles to green spaces. Every night, I buried myself in books, staying up late to complete assignments. But unlike the days when I was forced to work at the restaurant, now, every moment of learning felt meaningful. And then, I met Professor Bennett, the man who changed my life. Professor Bennett was in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair and piercing eyes. He wasn't one to give compliments lightly, but one day, after I presented my garden design project, he paused, studying it intently before nodding. "There's something here," he said, his voice calm yet certain. "The way you use space, the way you blend colors. This isn't just a drawing. It has emotion." I was stunned. No one had ever spoken about my work like that before. "You have talent, Emma. Don't waste it. Work even harder." Those words ignited a new fire in my veins. I started doing more, studying more, experimenting more. Madison and I became a perfect team for group projects. Gradually, other professors began to notice me too. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was truly walking my own path. I was no longer Ethan's shadow, no longer the dreamy child in my parents' eyes. I was Emma Walker, and I was becoming a landscape designer. I don't remember when my phone slipped from my hands. Aunt Laura's message, my mother's younger sister, still glowed on the screen. "Emma, Grandma Margaret has passed away. Come home immediately." My world shattered in that instant. I bolted out of my dorm, barely registering Madison's voice calling after me. My mind was blank, my heartbeat frantic as I hailed a cab home. Grandma Margaret was the only person in my family who had ever stood by me. When my parents turned their backs, she was the one who welcomed me with open arms. When I doubted my path, she was the first to tell me I could do it. And now, she was gone. Suddenly, cruelly. When I arrived at her house, Aunt Laura was already there, along with some other relatives. The house I once called my sanctuary now felt eerily quiet. I stepped into the backyard, where Grandma and I had spent countless afternoons tending to every flower bed, every branch. But today, no one was there. Only the wind rustled through the lavender rows, carrying an emptiness that ached deep inside me. The funeral passed in silence. I stood by her grave, my hands cold, my heart heavy. There were no words to express this pain. But then, as if fate refused to leave me alone, something else happened. Something inevitable. Grandma Margaret's will was read. And I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She had left this house to me. I looked up, almost expecting someone to say this was a mistake. But the lawyer simply confirmed it in a calm, steady voice. Margaret wanted Emma to have this house, along with the entire garden. That was her final wish. The room tensed immediately. My mother Diane went pale. My father Richard clenched his fists. Ethan, as always, laughed. "This is unbelievable," my mother spoke first, her voice trembling with anger. "This house belongs to the family. There is no way Mom would leave it to her." The lawyer remained composed. "I understand this is difficult to accept. But this was Margaret's decision. All legal documents are in order." My father's voice hardened. "This house could be sold for a great price. That money could help us open another restaurant branch." He turned to me, his gaze sharp as a blade. "Emma, you can't keep it. It means nothing to you." My heart pounded. He was wrong. This house meant more to me than anything in the world. Ethan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "Be honest, Emma. What are you going to do with it? Plant more trees?" He scoffed. "What a waste." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "I'm keeping it." My mother turned to me, eyes blazing. "You can't be serious." I met her gaze. "I'm completely serious. This was Grandma's home, and I'm keeping it, just as she wanted." Silence blanketed the room. My father abruptly stood, shoving his chair back. "If that's your decision, don't expect any help from us." I clenched my fists under the table. I was used to that threat. I never expected it. Ethan smirked, but this time, I didn't care. They could be angry, they could look down on me, but I knew I was doing the right thing. I would turn this house into something special. Not for them, but for Grandma Margaret. For the dream I was chasing. I had lost the most important person in my life. But I wouldn't lose myself. A wedding invitation sat neatly on the table, gold embossed under the warm light. Ethan Walker and Olivia Carter cordially invite you to celebrate our special day. I stared at the words, feeling a mix of unfamiliarity and bitterness. Ethan was getting married. A part of me wasn't surprised. He had always been the one who had everything handed to him. From our parents' favoritism to his success in the business world. I hadn't seen my family since Grandma Margaret's will was read, and now? They were sending me this invitation? I almost threw it away. But then I stopped. Why should I be the one to hide? I had built my own career. The city park I designed had been featured in multiple magazines, and my community garden project had become a local landmark. I was no longer the girl my family once mocked. If I was going, it wouldn't be to blend into the background. It would be to prove to myself that I had stepped out of their shadow. So I decided to attend. The wedding was held in one of the most luxurious venues in New York, extravagant and opulent. Just like the life Ethan had always chased. I walked in, my pale blue dress hugging my figure, my hair neatly pinned up, exuding a confidence I had never carried before. I passed through rows of elegantly set tables, the lively chatter filling the air, but as I approached the family area, an awkward silence settled. My mother Diane was the first to speak, her voice as cold as I remembered. "Emma! Didn't think you'd actually come." I smirked. Didn't think I'd be invited. Ethan stood next to his new bride, Olivia. A beautiful woman with eyes that held a distinct air of arrogance. She looked me up and down before tilting her head, her voice sweet but laced with condescension. "Emma, right? I've heard so much about you from Ethan. I suppose you're still busy with your little plants?" I gave her a small, knowing smile. Yes, except now, those little plants are landing me multi-million-dollar contracts and magazine covers. I sighed. Olivia's eyes narrowed slightly, but she quickly masked it with a composed expression. Ethan let out a dry chuckle. "Really? Funny, I always pictured you still wandering around Grandma's garden, pulling weeds." I tightened my grip on my wineglass but kept my smile. "Oh, I've done a lot more than that. But I guess you haven't been keeping up with the news." My father, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke, his gaze sharp. "This family doesn't have time to follow frivolous things. We're busy with real work." I let out a soft laugh. "Then maybe you should start paying attention. Because it seems like my frivolous work is gaining the interest of some very important people." At that moment, a voice rang out from the main stage. "Please give a warm welcome to the Mayor of New York." The entire room turned toward the stage, and I froze as I saw Mayor Robert Collins, one of the biggest supporters of my city park project, standing at the podium. "What a wonderful night to celebrate Ethan and Olivia," he began, his smile warm. "But before we continue, I'd like to take a moment to recognize someone special who is here tonight. A young talent who has completely transformed the landscape of this city." I felt the entire family table stiffen. "Emma Walker." All eyes turned to me as he gestured toward my seat. Emma is the designer behind the stunning transformation of our Central Park, a project that has redefined urban green spaces. She has brought artistry into every detail, turning it into a new symbol of the city. Applause erupted across the ballroom. I couldn't let this moment pass. Standing up, I walked toward the mayor, shaking his hand as my family watched, in stunned silence. After offering a few words of gratitude, I returned to my table, where my parents and Ethan still sat, visibly shaken. My mother finally spoke, her voice quieter than usual. "Emma? You actually did it?" I met her gaze, for the first time in my life, unafraid. I did. And I don't need anyone's approval to know that. Ethan gripped his wineglass tightly, clearly trying to mask his discomfort. Olivia whispered something in his ear, her expression irritated. I lifted my glass slightly, smirking. Congratulations, Ethan. And congratulations to the whole family, because now you can no longer dismiss the gardening girl. I turned and walked away, leaving them to stew in their own humiliation. My phone rang late in the afternoon while I was reviewing the design plans for a new project. I glanced at the screen. Mom. I hesitated. The last time we spoke was at Ethan's wedding, and that conversation had been far from pleasant. But I couldn't pretend she didn't exist. Taking a deep breath, I answered the call. My love. Her voice was overly cheerful, so much so that it immediately put me on guard. I'm so proud of you. I've been reading so many articles about your achievements lately. Who would have thought my little girl would become so successful? I stayed silent for a few seconds, trying to decipher what game she was playing. My parents had never cared about my work, at least not until it became valuable to them. Leaning back in my chair, I kept my voice neutral. I thought our family didn't have time to follow frivolous things like this. Mom laughed, but I could hear the tension beneath it. Oh, you know me, I just wanted to make sure you were doing well. Anyway, why don't you come home for a visit? It's been so long since we all sat down together. I frowned. Things couldn't have been more obvious. There must be a reason you suddenly want to see me, right? I asked bluntly. Mom hesitated for a few seconds before letting out a nervous chuckle. What are you talking about, Emma? I just want the family to be closer again. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see it. I don't have time, Mom. You say you want to make amends, but I remember very well who pushed me out of this family in the first place. Before she could say anything else, I hung up. 3 days later, as I was tending to Grandma Margaret's garden, a knock sounded at the door. Wiping my hands on my jeans, I walked over and opened it. Ethan stood there, hands in his pockets, looking uncomfortable. I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorframe. What now? He took a deep breath, trying to keep his voice casual. I just wanted to check in on you. I scoffed. You've never cared about that before. Ethan bit his lip, then sighed. Emma, I know I haven't been a great brother. But the restaurant business is struggling. Mom and Dad are under a lot of financial pressure. I know you're successful, and I waited for him to finish. Can you help us out a little? A cold fury spread through me. So this was why they had reached out. Not because they cared, but because they thought I could be useful to them now. I folded my arms tighter, locking eyes with him. Do you remember, Ethan? When I needed just a little bit of support from the family, what did everyone do? Dad cut me off financially, Mom mocked my career path, and you... I let out a short laugh. You ridiculed me every chance you got. Ethan looked away. I continued. But I'm not here to hold grudges. I just want to make one thing clear. I am not this family's wallet. You all made your choices, and I made mine. I built everything on my own without anyone's help. And now, I owe no one anything. Ethan clenched his fists, looking like he wanted to argue, but then he simply exhaled and averted his gaze. I took a step forward, my voice firm. You can leave now. Ethan opened his mouth as if to say something, but in the end he just gave a small nod and walked away. I shut the door, leaning against it. A soft breeze swept through the garden, rustling the leaves of the plants I had nurtured for so long. For the first time in my life, I truly felt free. I had never imagined a day when I could feel this light. After that encounter with Ethan, there were no more calls from Mom, no more messages from Dad. No one showed up at my doorstep with fake sentiments about family and unity. They had finally understood. I was no longer the weak girl they could control. And I had no regrets. I devoted myself entirely to my work, the one thing that had never betrayed me. My new landscape design project was gaining attention in the architectural world, attracting bigger clients and more valuable contracts. But most importantly, I was doing what I loved every single day, free from judgment. Grandma Margaret's house had been completely transformed. I had turned the garden into something special. A place full of life, with the flowers she loved, the trees I had planted with my own hands, and carefully designed stone pathways. It was no longer just a garden, it was a part of me. It was where I belonged. One spring morning, I stepped outside, taking a deep breath of the crisp air, feeling the warm sunlight filtering through the trees. The sound of birds chirping echoed in the breeze, blending with the gentle rustling of leaves. I reached out and touched a sprig of lavender, memories of my childhood flooding back. Days spent sitting on the porch with Grandma, our hands covered in dirt, yet our hearts lighter than ever. As long as you know where you belong, you will find your path. Her words still echoed in my mind, but now, I was no longer searching for the answer. I already knew where I belonged. No more restaurants. No more tense family dinners. No more condescending looks or mocking remarks. There was only me. And the dream I had turned into reality. A soft breeze swept through, carrying the delicate scent of flowers. I closed my eyes, feeling every breath of nature around me. For the first time in my life, I was truly happy and free. Emma's story is not just about following a passion. It is a powerful reminder of the value of independence and perseverance. In reality, many people are bound by family expectations, pressured to walk a path that was never meant for them. But true success does not come from pleasing others. It comes from having the courage to choose your own way and relentlessly pursuing it. Sometimes, to find happiness, we must be willing to let go of toxic relationships and build the life we truly want. I used to think if one day I almost died, my parents would be the first people by my bedside sobbing uncontrollably, clutching my hand and praying. But it turned out, on that day, they chose the spotlight and applause for their perfect son. I lay motionless in a hospital bed, ribs broken, blood seeping beneath layers of stark white bandages, and waited for the people who should have loved me the most. 4 days after the accident, their first message wasn't, "Are you okay?" but instead, "Your brother received a huge award that day, you should be proud." I didn't die in that terrible collision. But a part of me shattered from that moment on. A part that would never heal again. My name is Vivian. I'm 31 years old, living in Portland, Oregon and working as a design team leader at a tech company. People often say I'm strong, independent, the kind of woman who can handle anything life throws her way. But on that fateful Friday afternoon, I felt as fragile as a crystal glass smashed onto a tiled floor. I was driving home from work when an SUV ran a red light and crashed directly into the side of my car. The screeching sound of metal colliding echoed. The world spun violently, and then everything went numb. When I woke up, I found myself in the intensive care unit, wrapped in bandages, and the doctors told me I'd had emergency surgery to stop internal bleeding, had broken 2 ribs, and fractured my right leg. They said I was lucky to have survived. I didn't feel lucky, I just felt cold. In my hazy consciousness, I asked the nurse, "Where are my parents?" She looked at me, hesitated a few seconds, then softly replied, "They haven't arrived yet, but we contacted them right after you were admitted. They're listed as your emergency contacts." I nodded, trying to suppress the pain in my chest, convincing myself they must be on a flight from Denver. Maybe they needed time to arrange things. Maybe my mom was too shocked to answer the phone. I sent a text, not just once but several times. Every few hours. Typing the same short message. "I'm okay. I want to hear your voices." No one replied. 4 days passed in the coldness of the hospital room and the painful silence. I had no siblings other than Noah, my younger brother, whom my parents always called the genius of the family. Noah was their pride, the dazzling light onto whom they poured all their expectations. Meanwhile, I was just their daughter, the self-sufficient one, never complaining, never asking for anything. On the 6th day, an old friend of my mom, Elaine, visited me. She lived in Salem and heard about my accident from someone else. When she saw me lying there, she sighed, set down the flowers, and whispered, "Poor girl." Well, at least your parents had some comfort that day. Noah was honored in front of the whole state council. It was a grand award ceremony. I looked at her, mouth dry. "What did you say?" "Oh, you didn't know? The Young Engineer of the Year award. Your parents posted pictures all over Facebook, even live-streamed the event. Everyone commented how proud they were." I don't remember how I reacted. Maybe I laughed. Or maybe I cried without realizing tears were streaming down my face. Everything became blurry. It felt like I was reaching up from a deep pit, and instead of pulling me out, the people I loved most turned and walked away because they had a party to attend. The doctor said I should focus on recovery. But how could I recover when my heart was breaking apart? I wasn't jealous of Noah, really. My brother was talented, hard-working, and I'd never denied that. But I was also their child. I had also hugged my dad during thunderstorms, called my mom whenever I had a fever. Yet, when I nearly died, they chose champagne and applause. I don't know which hurt more, the physical pain, or the realization that I would never be enough for them. It took me nearly half a day to regain composure after hearing about Noah's award ceremony from Elaine. My mind kept replaying the image of my mom, smiling brightly in the teal dress she always reserved for special occasions, and my dad, shaking hands with everyone, proudly introducing his son as if he'd invented a vaccine to save the world. I lay in my hospital bed, IV drip attached to my arm, leg cast dangling awkwardly, and typed on my phone, like someone losing her mind. "You knew I had an accident and still attended Noah's award ceremony? I've been here 4 days, no messages, no calls. Do you honestly think that's normal?" I sent the texts, then lay waiting. My phone screen blurred because tears had already filled my eyes. A response arrived around 9 p.m. "Vivian, don't make such a big deal out of this. Noah's event was an important milestone, something we couldn't miss. We couldn't be in 2 places at once." Immediately after, another message, this time from my dad. "Do you realize how hard Noah has worked to achieve this? A national award ceremony? You can stay in the hospital as long as needed, but this was a once-in-a-lifetime event." I couldn't believe what I was reading. I typed quickly, fingers trembling. "So my life isn't as important as an award certificate?" I almost died. I had emergency surgery, broken ribs, and endured pain alone for 4 days. This time, my mom called. Her voice wasn't gentle like I'd hoped. "Honey, don't talk to me like that. I know you're hurting, but can you stop playing the victim?" I gripped the phone tightly. "I am a victim, Mom. A victim of an accident. And now, a victim of your cruel indifference." "Enough," she snapped. "I don't have the patience for your complaints. Everyone is stressed because the media is after Noah since the ceremony. Your dad is busy giving interviews. I can't always be there watching over you." I fell silent. The air was thick and suffocating. I felt that if I heard one more word, I would scream like a madwoman. "So, I'm a burden?" "Don't say that," she quickly replied, her voice softening slightly. "But you need to understand. Noah is the one bringing honor to this family. Everything he does matters. And you're fine now, aren't you?" Yes, I was alive. But at that moment, I wished I hadn't woken up. At least then, I wouldn't have had to hear those words from my own mother. I hung up without another word. The phone fell from my hand as I turned toward the wall, letting the pain in my chest spread through my body like fire. The next day, I received a photo from Mom. It showed Noah on stage, holding a shiny golden trophy. Beneath it was a caption, "Our pride and joy." I didn't reply, just pressed delete. I didn't want to see anything else. But my brain wouldn't let go. Memories I had tried so hard to sweep away now resurfaced clearly. The time I received a college scholarship, my parents had only sent one word. "Good." The day I got promoted last year, my mother said, Your boss must be easygoing. Noah was different. Always a celebration. Always a photo on Facebook with captions like, "This boy was born to shine." I had tried not to be jealous. I'd told myself I could live well without their recognition. But today, lying among unhealed surgical wounds, I felt completely drained. I didn't want to remain on the sidelines anymore. I sat up, painfully, but managed to reach for my phone. I sent one final message. "If you ever chose me even once in your lives, it must have been a mistake. From now on, don't expect me to keep pretending otherwise." I didn't wait for a reply. For the first time in years, I felt I wasn't begging for affection anymore. I felt angry, but clearer than ever. I didn't think I'd ever see their faces again, at least, not in the hospital. But exactly 1 week later, on a gloomy afternoon heavy with the smell of antiseptic, the hospital door swung open. My mother walked in first, holding a bouquet of white lilies, followed by my father, his face tense, as if forced to come. I looked at them, feeling empty. No joy, no anger, just cold. "Vivian, it's Mom," she said, a forced smile on her carefully made-up face. "We just came by to see how you're doing." 8 days late, I replied, my voice dry as sandpaper. My father coughed slightly, as if trying to drown the tension. "Your mother was very worried. We've been extremely busy." The awards ceremony. I raised my head, looking straight into their eyes. "Or did something else make you suddenly remember you have a daughter?" No one spoke. That silence wasn't new to me. I'd grown up with it. A truth covered beneath layers of fake politeness. I pushed myself up with my arms, pain rippling from my ribs down to my back, but I refused to let them see. I just wanted them to admit the real reason they came. "What do you want?" My mother hesitated, placing the bouquet on the table. "It's about Noah." I chuckled softly, making no attempt to hide my sarcasm. "Of course." My father blinked, gripping tightly at the edge of his jacket pocket. "Noah, he's in trouble, you probably heard. He got arrested yesterday, financial fraud charges at his company." "What kind of fraud?" I asked, though a bad feeling already formed in my gut. "The police said something about illegal transfers, falsifying records. They accused him of fraud and embezzling investment funds." "But it can't be as serious as they're claiming. There must be some misunderstanding." I crossed my arms, staring at the two people in front of me as if watching a documentary. "And now what do you need? Money?" My mother quickly nodded. "We hired the best lawyer in Portland, but the bail is too high and we've already spent all our savings. Vivian, can you help just this once?" I laughed, although it sounded like a thin mirror shattering. "Why should I do that?" "Because he's your brother," my mother shouted, losing her fake gentleness. I raised an eyebrow. "And who am I? A stranger? Or an ATM wearing a hospital gown?" My father cut in, his voice low with restrained anger. "Aren't you ashamed? Your brother is being publicly humiliated. Our whole family's reputation is being dragged through the mud. This is when we must stick together." "Stick together?" My fists clenched until my knuckles turned white. "When I lay here half dead, no one called, no one visited. Is that your idea of sticking together?" "You're too sensitive," my mother sighed. "Noah's never been in trouble like this before. Help him through this, and everything will go back to normal." I looked at them for a long moment. It felt like my blood was running backward. Memories of being forgotten, of endless praise for Noah, stabbed at my heart like needles. "No," I said, cutting through the air like a blade. "Vivian," my father growled. "I have no obligation to rescue someone who has always been favored and never once cared about his sister. Noah isn't a 6-year-old who broke a vase. He's an adult. He broke the law. He pays the price." My mother fell silent, stepping back as if she'd been slapped. "You're tearing this family apart," she whispered. "You're turning your back on your own blood." I shook my head. "No. This family was never built on genuine love. It's just a show. and I've always been kept off stage. My father's face turned red. You'll regret this, Vivian. Someday, when we're gone. I cut him off. I've regretted it for the past 31 years, always begging for affection from people who never truly loved me. Today, for the first time, I don't feel wrong anymore. The room sank into silence. No one spoke another word. My parents stood there for a few seconds, then turned away. My mother pulled out a tissue, wiping her dry eyes. The door closed behind them with a cold click, like the final punctuation to something that had rotted away long ago. I lay back onto the bed, exhausted, yet relieved. For the first time, I chose to stand by myself. 3 days after being discharged, I returned to my small apartment on the 3rd floor of a quiet building in East Portland. The place I once considered my safe haven from both the world and my own family. I thought I could finally breathe, lie quietly on my bed without hearing the heart monitor or smelling antiseptics. But I was wrong. Just as I reached the hallway, balancing on my crutches and fumbling with the key, I heard the sharp click of high heels against concrete. Vivian. I turned around. My mother. She wore the expensive brown fur coat she always put on when she wanted to show off her status. Beside her stood my father, arms crossed, glaring at me like a detective about to interrogate a criminal. I sighed heavily. Please. I just came home from the hospital. Don't start. Don't start? My mother almost screamed, her voice so high a neighbor peeked out through a crack in her door. Do you realize what you're doing? You're destroying this family. I tried to keep my voice calm. By refusing to give money to a criminal. My father took a step forward, his face flushed. He's your brother, Vivian, your own flesh and blood. How can you coldly watch him rot in jail? I'm standing here on crutches because someone ran a red light and slammed into my car. While I was lying in the emergency room, you were at an award ceremony. Don't talk to me about family. My mother started crying. Not quiet tears, but loud, heaving sobs, clutching her chest as if she'd lost everything. We've already lost one child and now we're losing the other, she sobbed. You're punishing us just because we love Noah more. I narrowed my eyes, struggling to keep my balance on shaking arms. So, you admit it? You've always loved Noah more than me? It's not like that, she screamed, then lowered her voice as if the truth had slipped out too fast. It's just, he needed us more, and now he needs you. What about me? 4 days alone in the hospital without anyone by my side? Does that not count as needing? My father interrupted. This isn't about you anymore, Vivian. The family is being pushed into a corner. The press is everywhere. Acquaintances keep calling. Everyone expects Noah to be bailed out. Our family's reputation is at stake. I nodded. So, family means public image, not the children lying in the hospital with broken bones. Don't talk to your mother like that, my father snapped. I stepped back, putting my key into the lock. You two should leave. Not until you change your mind, my mother stomped her foot. You can't keep being this selfish. It's time to prove you're part of this family. I spun around, meeting her gaze. I was never allowed to be part of this family, Mom. For years, I was just a shadow. Now, you only remember me because of my bank account. My father moved forward, his voice lowering dangerously. This is your last chance, Vivian. If you don't help, we'll never forgive you. I laughed. Forgive? You've never once apologized to me. Forgive what? My mother trembled, tears falling without sincerity. We don't even know who you are anymore. Good, I nodded. And I don't want either of you knowing anything about my life for even one more second. As I opened the door, intending to step inside, my mother grabbed my arm so suddenly that I nearly lost my balance. Let go, I said, my voice low and firm. Vivian, you're destroying everything, she screamed. I looked straight into her eyes, coldly. If you don't leave within 5 seconds, I'll call the police. And trust me, I won't regret it. They both froze for a few seconds. Finally, my father pulled her hand away, gripping her shoulder tightly, as if preventing her from collapsing. They turned, said nothing more, and disappeared down the stairs. I slammed the door shut, locking all 3 locks, then leaned against it, exhaling sharply. My chest hurt fiercely. I wasn't sure if it was from the unhealed bones or because my heart had just been stripped bare once again. But I knew one thing clearly. I'd done the right thing. I was no longer an obedient shadow. I was myself. And I wouldn't let anyone, not even those who gave birth to me, cross my boundaries ever again. 3 days after the confrontation in front of my apartment, Noah Sinclair's name flooded every newspaper and morning news segment. The headline on a major financial news site blazed in red. Young CFO charged with money laundering and multi-million-dollar fraud conspiracy. I sat on the sofa, my right leg still in a cast propped up on a pillow, a cold cup of coffee in my hand. It wasn't that I hadn't anticipated this, but reality far exceeded my imagination. Noah wasn't just involved in a few shady accounts, as my parents had suggested. He was one of 3 key suspects in a federal money laundering case involving more than 6 shell companies and millions of dollars funneled overseas through anonymous accounts. The news was everywhere. CNN, Fox, CNBC. They aired footage of Noah in a charcoal gray suit, hands cuffed, stepping out of the FBI building in downtown Portland, his eyes blank, as if he couldn't believe what was happening. At the same time, the list of accomplices gradually emerged, including several senior executives from Noah's company. I thought, finally, the perfect illusion has collapsed. My phone rang continuously. Messages came from colleagues, old friends, and even distant relatives I thought had forgotten I existed. But what I didn't expect was the 3rd call that morning, an unfamiliar but recognizable number appearing on my screen. Dad. I hesitated a few seconds, then picked up. Silence. Then his voice. Hoarse, exhausted, as if he'd swallowed a storm. Vivian, we need to talk. I leaned back, holding the phone a few inches from my ear. I thought we'd made things clear. I know. I know you're angry, and I'm not here to blame you anymore. He paused, then continued. We need you. I closed my eyes, silently counting to 3. Money again? We no longer have the means. Noah won't get bail without a new amount. The lawyer withdrew, accounts are frozen, and I lost a major client this morning. I opened my eyes. Was he involved in Noah's case? No. But he said, our family is no longer ethically trustworthy. My father's voice choked up. It was the first time I'd ever heard my father, the man always leading meetings, always believing the world must admire his son, admit defeat. Vivian, if you help us this time, we might save some of our reputation, preserve at least a little bit of Noah's image going forward. I laughed, a dry, bitter laugh. Reputation? Image? Are you really asking me for help? Or are you just worried people will realize we're not the perfect family anymore? This isn't the time for blame. No, it's exactly the time, I replied, sitting up straight, voice hard as stone. When I was alone and in pain in the hospital, you chose cameras and spotlights. Now, when your golden child's true colors are showing, you come running back to me for help? No chance. Vivian, your mother has cried herself to sleep, he whispered. She says if you don't help, we'll lose everything. I don't care anymore, I said coldly. And if Mom wants to cry, let her remember the 4 days I waited for a message that never came. He was silent. I lowered my voice, slowly. If you have any respect left for me, don't call again. Then I hung up. That afternoon I received an email from my mother. I didn't open it. I deleted it. In the days afterward, a few midnight texts arrived. Long emotional messages, vague apologies, interwoven with pleas for financial help. I replied to none. News continued to report on the investigation. Several executives had already pleaded guilty. But Noah kept denying the charges. On social media, the name Noah Sinclair became a joke. Golden boy turned ghost. The one praised as a genius was now ruthlessly mocked by internet users. I didn't feel happy, but I didn't feel sorry either. Perhaps all I felt was relief? Standing by my window, watching Portland fade into gray rain, my heart was empty, yet light. For the first time in years, I wasn't being dragged back into the chaos called family. And I promised myself I'd never return there again. I thought everything would calm down after I bluntly refused my parents. But then, one Saturday night, as I sat reading news on my laptop, an email popped up with a suspiciously simple subject line. From Noah. I stared at the sender's name. The address was from a monitored inmate email system. For a moment, I almost deleted it unread. My heart raced, not from affection, but from a mix of disgust, anger, and curiosity. Finally, I clicked. Vivian, I know you probably don't want to read this, but I have no one else left to trust. Things are getting worse, and I feel like a pawn sacrificed to protect powerful people. I don't deny my guilt. I participated. I know I was wrong. But I'm not the mastermind. I was just a link between upper management and the money. They're putting everything on me, Vivian. I don't know if you'll believe me, but I'm collapsing under a burden that's not entirely mine. You've always been fair. The only person in the family brave enough to face the truth. Please, if not for me, then for Mom and Dad. Our family is falling apart. I'm begging you. No, I froze. Something in the tone left me conflicted. This wasn't the usual arrogant, cocky Noah. No boasting, no avoidance of responsibility. Just a confession. Direct and desperate. I didn't immediately trust it. I wasn't easily swayed anymore. But I couldn't ignore it either. I sent a quick message to an old friend, Julian, a lawyer I'd known since college who now worked in financial law and had assisted with internal investigations at major companies. I asked simply, if a mid-level employee is accused of financial fraud but claims he's just an executor, not the mastermind, is there a way to verify that? Julian replied in less than 15 minutes. Yes, check prosecution files and witness statements. If there's higher-level collusion not yet publicly revealed, it'll appear in preliminary indictments or interrogation transcripts. Send me names and company details. I'll help check. I sent him the information, feeling uneasy, as if reopening a door I should have left permanently locked. 2 days later, Julian sent back a PDF file along with a short message. You should read this. Your brother isn't innocent, but he's not the mastermind. At least 3 senior executives are implicated in the FBI's files and are currently under separate investigation. Some accounts Noah transferred funds through were secondary channels, not initiated by him. But he still willingly participated. I opened the document, each line slicing through me, confronting me with a harsh reality. Dozens of pages detailed cash flows, connections between individuals, recorded phone calls and company emails extracted from the system. Noah had signed several fraudulent transfers, his name appeared in falsified financial documents. But there was also evidence showing he had been directed by others who exploited his inexperience and blind trust. I wondered, did he know what he was doing? Or did he intentionally close his eyes to climb the ladder faster? I remembered the way my parents had always praised Noah. Noah is exceptionally intelligent. He was born to lead. If he pushes just a little harder, the whole world will know his name. He grew up in an environment where results were valued over morals, where success at all costs was the guiding principle. No wonder he believed he was invincible. I closed my eyes, tightening my fists. Part of me wanted to hit reply and scream at him for his stupidity. Another part wanted to ask him, why? But I didn't send anything, no replies, no rescue. Because even if Noah wasn't the mastermind, he chose that path. No one forced him, no one held a gun to his head. He could have stopped at any time. Instead, he went all the way. And now, he must face the consequences. I stood up, pulled back the curtains, and stared out at the city under the drizzling rain. There are some things, no matter how painful, you must accept. And I no longer wanted to save anyone. Especially someone who never saw me as family. I thought things would end after I didn't respond to Noah's email. But my parents had no concept of accepting refusal. If they couldn't persuade me, they'd find ways to make me regret it. A week later, I noticed something strange happening on social media. A cousin I rarely spoke to messaged, "Vivian, Aunt Ellen just called my mom and said you're so cruel that you're leaving your brother to rot in jail. What's going on?" I felt my blood freeze. A few hours later, another message came from my cousin in New Jersey. "Your parents are telling everyone in the family you hate Noah out of jealousy and want to destroy the family. Are you okay?" Apparently, my parents hadn't just blamed me, they'd invented an entirely false story. They claimed I had abandoned family, that I was a cold-hearted person, and, surprise, that I was holding on to hundreds of thousands of dollars but refused to help my brother because of personal grudges. I should have felt angry, but all I felt was exhausted. It was as if they were rewriting my entire life using the voice of manipulators. I didn't intend to defend myself. I knew those who trusted me wouldn't swallow their lies. But then, something unexpected happened. One by one, relatives I thought had long forgotten me started reaching out. Not to blame, but to support me? Aunt Carol from Ohio wrote, "Vivian, I don't believe what they're saying. Your mom once called me asking for money after Noah lost $50,000 on a startup project that never existed. When I refused, they cut off contact for 3 years." My cousin Mark recalled a time Noah blamed him for losing client data during a summer internship. "He almost cost me my scholarship. Your parents didn't investigate, they just told me to take responsibility to protect the family's image." My cousin Alina messaged, "Remember Noah's 18th birthday, when they hired a band and threw a big outdoor party? Well, for yours it was just a microwaved cake." "I remember. The look on your face." Silent but clear as a mirror. I read each message, each recovered memory. For years, I thought I was the only one cast aside. But it turned out, I wasn't alone. My parents' favoritism toward Noah wasn't just about pampering him. They sacrificed everyone else to prop up the image of their perfect son. I started remembering, not just the times my achievements were ignored, but also the times I was labeled too sensitive, dramatic, simply for daring to question them. They always told me I was overthinking. Turns out I was just the only one awake enough to notice something was deeply wrong. That night, I opened my laptop and wrote a long email to the relatives who had reached out. "Thank you all for believing and sharing your stories. I'm not writing to justify myself, just to say, I'm tired of begging for recognition. I no longer want to be part of a family where a daughter's worth is measured by how many times she can forgive those who disregarded her." I pressed send, then leaned back in my chair. Inside, instead of sadness, was an oddly comforting sense of relief. I had thought cutting ties with my parents would mean losing everything. But in reality, only by breaking free did I finally see who truly stood by me. A day later, I logged out of all my old social media accounts, changed my phone number, and sent a letter to building management, instructing them not to allow anyone outside my approved guest list onto my floor. I changed the locks on my front door and installed a camera at the entrance. I was no longer afraid of being called the ungrateful child. I was Vivian. And I had survived, without anyone's pity. News about Noah's release on bail broke on a foggy Monday morning. I got the notification from a friend in the legal field, along with a brief message. "Your brother's family managed to handle it. He confessed everything for a plea deal." Not long afterward, the press published the details. Noah had signed a cooperation agreement with federal investigators, providing the names of over 7 senior executives, along with dozens of emails and falsified internal transaction records. In exchange, his sentence was reduced to 12 months in prison and 2 years of community service, without financial penalties. A relatively generous deal, considering the severity of the case. My parents, according to a maternal relative, mortgaged their second house in Bend to cover the bail. There were even rumors that they took a private loan from one of my father's old friends, a businessman known for his dislike of trouble. Either way, they succeeded. Their beloved son was allowed home until the official court date. As for me, I remained silent. Not a single word. No opening doors. Not even a backward glance. I had officially requested building management add my parents' names to the no visitation list. I changed my phone number and blocked every email associated with them. Noah, too, was permanently blocked. No more pleading messages, no more midnight calls from my mother screaming in desperation. No more threats that, "You'll regret this," when we're dead. I didn't want to know how they lived, nor did I care whether Noah repeated his mistakes or not. Some called me heartless, others said I was ungrateful. A few distant relatives even labeled me a traitor to my own blood. But they weren't there when I lay alone in the hospital, attached to breathing tubes and weighed down by loneliness like heavy chains. They hadn't spent 31 years living in the shadow of blatant favoritism. They weren't always pushed aside, always told, "Your problems don't matter as much as your brothers." I was the only one paying the price for my parents' abandonment, and now I was the only one brave enough to cut that cord. These days I wake up earlier. I learned to make coffee by hand rather than gulping it down quickly from a machine. I spend time reading books on the balcony, where morning sunlight filters gently through the leaves, shimmering on my damp hair after a shower. No more phone alerts making my heart seize, no more emails filled with manipulation, complaints, or guilt trips. One Saturday morning, as I walked around the lake near my home, I paused to sit on a familiar wooden bench. Beside me, an elderly woman was feeding breadcrumbs to ducks. She turned to me and smiled. "You look at peace." I smiled back. For the first time in my life. And it wasn't just polite conversation. I truly felt lighter. No more burden of being the good child. No more trying to prove my worth to people who never saw me as a complete person. No more fighting to be seen, heard, or loved. I was just myself. And that was enough. My apartment became a peaceful haven. The frames on my wall no longer contained family photos, but pictures I'd taken on short trips: Seattle, Napa Valley, Santa Fe. I began revisiting old dreams, ideas I'd previously hidden for fear of ridicule. I started painting and joined a support group for adults who had experienced toxic family relationships. I no longer needed my family's validation to feel worthy. I rebuilt my life, brick by brick. Solid. Unbreakable. In the end, I didn't need to win. I just needed peace. And I found it. Not in anyone else's embrace, but within myself. Vivian's story is clear proof that sometimes blood isn't synonymous with unconditional love. Prolonged favoritizing, manipulation, and disregard can force someone to make decisive choices to protect themselves. Though labeled as a family traitor, Vivian chose freedom rather than continue carrying responsibilities that weren't hers. Ultimately, she discovered that self-worth doesn't come from others' approval, but from knowing when to say no, and being true to herself. What do you think about Vivian's decision? Was she too cold? Or was it a necessary act of self-protection? Share your thoughts below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more touching and profound real-life stories. I was a joke in my own family. They never truly saw me as part of the lavish world they had built. I was invisible among those who considered themselves the center of the universe. But tonight, they pushed me to my breaking point. The cheap coupon lay in my hand, its faded print a blatant mockery. $25 off your next purchase at Bargain Mart. That was my 32nd birthday gift. Amidst the glittering chandeliers and overpriced champagne, my family burst into laughter and applause as if they had done something kind. "Oh, Isabella, don't make that face." Andrew, my brother, chuckled, swirling his whiskey glass, his eyes gleaming with smug amusement. "We just thought you could use a little help. After all, you do need that coupon, don't you?" "Need?" I scoffed. They knew nothing about me. They thought I was struggling, scraping by at some mediocre job, living in some cheap apartment. They had no clue about my real life. My mother, Evelyn Carter, nodded with her usual tight-lipped smile, the kind she used to dismiss anything unworthy of her attention. Be practical, Isabella. You're always pinching pennies, so I figured you'd appreciate the gift. It's actually useful. Beside her, my father, Richard Carter, remained glued to his phone. One hand ran the largest real estate empire in the state. The other decided who in the family was worthy of his recognition. I, of course, had never made that list. Be grateful, he muttered without looking up. Andrew went through the trouble of arranging this dinner for you. Went through the trouble? I almost laughed out loud. All he had to do was pick up the phone and book a table at the most exclusive restaurant in the city, a place where a single bottle of wine on this table was worth more than the pathetic coupon they had just tossed at me. I clenched the crumpled paper in my hand, my chest cold with realization. I was used to their disdain, but never had it been this blatant. I wasn't a person to them anymore. I was a joke. Actually, Olivia, my younger sister, spoke up, pulling me from my thoughts. She leaned forward, eyes twinkling with excitement. Have you thought about Andrew's offer? If you want, he can pull some strings to get you a job as an assistant at Carter Enterprises. It's a great opportunity. A great opportunity? I nearly choked on my drink. They were offering me? Someone who had spent over a decade building my own financial empire, a job as an assistant at the family company? A company I knew better than the fools running it? A company that, in just a few hours, I would officially control? I glanced at my father, expecting him to shut Olivia down, to tell her not to say something so absurd, but no. He nodded, as if it were the most reasonable suggestion in the world. You should consider it, he said in his authoritative tone. It's time you learned what real work is. Real work? I gripped my wineglass, suppressing the bitter laughter threatening to escape. Who did they think I was, some failure desperate for their pity? I took a deep breath, swallowing down the storm brewing inside me. They would find out soon enough. I set my glass down, my gaze sweeping across each family member. They laughed, enjoying their extravagant dinner, unaware that by tomorrow, everything would change. I smoothed my dress and stood up, my voice calm but sharp as a blade. Thanks, but I don't need Andrew's help. My mother frowned. Sit down, Isabella, we're not done eating. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Some of us have more important matters to attend to in the morning. Andrew smirked, leaning back in his chair. Another part-time gig, or have you finally decided to get serious about your career? I tilted my head, my eyes locking onto his. You're right, Andrew, I am getting very serious. Very serious. I pulled a $200 bill from my wallet, placed it on the table 6 times the value of that pathetic coupon. Consider it a tip, because, as my dear brother always says, debts should be settled properly. Andrew laughed, clapping mockingly. He didn't get it. None of them did. But tomorrow morning, when they walked into that office, they would. They would finally understand who really controlled everything. I turned and walked away, leaving my family behind, still laughing, still oblivious to the fact that they were about to lose everything. I stepped out of the restaurant without looking back. The cold wind swept through my hair, but I didn't feel the chill. My fingers tightened around the phone in my coat pocket, my heart pounding. Not with anger, but with anticipation. Finally, after all these years, my plan was about to be complete. The black SUV pulled up right on time, the door swung open and Jacob sat inside, his gaze as sharp as ever. Everything is ready, he said the moment I shut the door. I nodded, taking a deep breath. Have the shareholders been notified? Jacob smirked slightly. The announcement goes live at 6 a.m. By the time Andrew wakes up, he'll realize he's no longer vice president. I couldn't suppress my smile. Andrew Carter, the arrogant fool who always saw himself as a financial genius, but was nothing more than a leech, living off the Carter name. He had no idea that the empire he was so proud of had been in my hands for a long time. I walked away from the Carter family 10 years ago, after my father pushed me out of the company. Back then, I had nothing but determination. I worked tirelessly at a small, unknown investment firm. I saved every dollar, investing in projects my family wouldn't even glance at. They thought I was struggling, barely getting by. In reality, I was quietly building my own empire. 5 years ago, I started acquiring shares of Carter Enterprises, bit by bit, through a web of subsidiaries and anonymous investment funds. 3 months ago, I became the majority shareholder. And tomorrow morning, the world would know. The SUV glided through the bustling streets of New York. I leaned back against the seat, closing my eyes, but my mind refused to rest. Jacob glanced at me through the rearview mirror. "Are you sure you don't want to wait until the board meeting to announce it? That way you could control their reactions better." I opened my eyes, staring out the window. "No. I want them to wake up and be blindsided. I want Andrew to walk into that office, feeling as confident as ever, only to realize he's lost everything." Jacob let out a quiet chuckle. "Rudolph." I shrugged. "I'm just giving them back what they gave me." Jacob didn't say another word. When the car stopped in front of my penthouse, he handed me a folder. "These are the final terms appointing you as interim CEO. The moment you sign tomorrow morning, you'll have full control." I took the documents, flipping through the pages. One signature was all it would take to control the billion-dollar corporation my family had mocked me for thinking I'd never reach. I lifted my gaze, meeting Jacob's eyes. "Good work. Now go get some rest, tomorrow will be a long day." He nodded and left. I stood on my balcony, looking down at the city, glowing beneath me. Tomorrow morning, New York would wake up to a major shift. I took a sip of wine, smirking. "Let's see who the real failure is now, Andrew." I stepped into Carter Enterprises at exactly 8 a.m., my head held high. The entire office fell silent as I walked through. Employees who once knew me only as Andrew's poor little sister now stared at me in confusion. I walked straight to the main conference room where an emergency board meeting had just been called. As I stepped inside, Andrew was slamming his hand against the table. "What the hell is this? Who authorized the stock sale? Who did this stupid thing?" I pulled out a chair, sat down, and smiled. "Good morning, Andrew." He whipped around to face me, his face flushed red. "What the hell are you doing here?" Leisurely, I pulled a stack of documents from my handbag and placed them on the table. "Today is a shareholder meeting, isn't it? And since I'm the majority shareholder, I figured I should be here." Andrew's face went pale. What did you just say?" I slid the documents toward him. "I now officially own 52% of Carter Enterprises. And that means—" I leaned forward, my voice slow and deliberate. "You are no longer the vice president." Silence blanketed the room. A board member slowly flipped through the documents. When he finally looked up, his voice trembled. She's right." Andrew stared at me, sheer horror flooding his eyes. I leaned back in my chair, crossed my arms, and flashed him a razor-sharp smile. "What was it you said, Andrew? Oh, right. Some of us could use a little financial assistance." His eyes darkened. "Isabella, don't do this." I smirked. "I already did." Andrew gasped, his hands trembling as they gripped the edge of the table. "You'll regret this." I tilted my head, locking my gaze onto him. "You think I spent a decade planning this without preparing for your retaliation?" Andrew had nothing left to say. I turned to the board, my voice firm. "Let's begin the meeting." And just like that, the reign of Andrew Carter came to an end. I sat in the boardroom, watching as the color drained from Andrew's face, his mind slowly processing the fact that everything he once had was no longer his. Once, I had wished to stand here under different circumstances. I had hoped my father would see my potential, give me a chance, just one chance, to prove that I was not useless. But that moment had never come. I closed my eyes, memories of the past rushing back like a slow-motion reel. I stood in front of the gleaming glass doors of Carter Enterprises, my heart pounding in my chest. I had just graduated from the Wharton School with top honors in finance, one of the most prestigious programs in the country. My transcripts were flawless, my internship experience impressive, and my ambition undeniable. I stepped into my father's office, full of hope. "Dad, I want to work here," I said, my voice resolute. Richard Carter looked up from his desk, his cold gray eyes scanning me. "Here? Why?" I took a deep breath. "Because I have the skills. I'm not asking for a high position, I just want a chance to start. I'll take any job the company needs." My father let out a quiet chuckle, but there was no warmth in it. It was laced with disdain. "Isabella, you don't understand how the world works." He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "You don't belong in this company. Business isn't about grades or degrees. You wouldn't survive in this environment." I clenched my fists but kept my voice steady. "I can learn." "No." His voice was cold, unwavering. I bit my lip. "What about Andrew? He has no degree in finance, no experience, so why was he made vice president the moment he graduated?" My father looked at me as if I had just said something utterly foolish. "Because Andrew is the rightful heir to the company, he is a true Carter." I froze. Not?" He didn't answer. I glanced around the office. The place I had once dreamed of working. But at that moment, I realized the harsh truth. They had never intended to give me a chance. Clenching the strap of my handbag, I bit my lip to keep from crying. "Then I'll find my own path." I turned and walked away, not waiting for a farewell. And that was the last day I ever believed I had a place in this family. The struggle of the early days. I left Carter Enterprises with nothing but empty hands. No family backing, no golden path laid out for me. I applied to over 30 companies, but despite my stellar academic record, I had no connections. After dozens of rejections, I finally landed a minor position at a small investment firm, Taylor & Finch. My first job? Making coffee. I wasn't allowed near financial reports. No one saw me as an employee with potential. I was invisible. Just as I had been to my family. But I didn't give up. Every night I stayed at the office later than everyone else. I quietly observed how the investment analysts studied the market, how they made decisions, how they deciphered numbers on financial reports. 3 months later, I convinced my manager to give me a shot at a small project. 6 months later, I was promoted to financial analyst. 3 years later, I became one of the firm's top investment specialists. And all that time, I had been doing something no one knew about. I was investing? The silent moves. While Andrew and Olivia burned through money on luxury vacations, sports cars and mansions, I poured every cent into stocks. I didn't invest in big-name companies like everyone else. I hunted for potential small businesses poised for exponential growth. I built a secret portfolio, brick by brick, stock by stock. Every dollar I earned was reinvested. Not in designer handbags or extravagant dinners, but in power. It took 8 years, but I amassed a fortune beyond anything my family could imagine. And then, I made my move. The day I started buying out Carter Enterprises. I didn't buy shares directly. I used a web of small investment funds, shell companies, and transactions handled by people with no visible ties to me. I bought tiny portions of Carter Enterprises, slowly, discreetly. Everyone believed the Carter family still controlled the company. But the truth? I was the one holding the reins. I watched as Andrew sat frozen, unable to process the news of my takeover. He had no idea what had happened. But I did. Because I had spent an entire decade planning for this moment. The morning I took over. As I stepped into Carter Enterprises the next morning, I felt something unfamiliar. Not because the place was foreign, but because today, I was no longer an outsider. My footsteps echoed against the marble floors, and employees turned to watch me, their gazes filled with confusion and uncertainty. The large glass doors of the boardroom swung open forcefully, dragging a dead silence over the room. At the head of the conference table, Andrew Carter, the man who once sat in power, was hunched over his laptop screen, staring at it intently. He had undoubtedly read the announcement, he knew. But he still hadn't accepted the truth. I pulled out a chair, sat down slowly, exuding confidence. "Good morning, Andrew." His head snapped up, eyes blazing with fury, though he struggled to maintain his composure. You think you can do this?" I gave him a cold smile. "I don't think, Andrew." I did. The board members sat in silence, not daring to breathe too loudly. I placed a stack of documents on the table, my voice calm yet carrying an undeniable weight. According to the latest financial reports, Carter Enterprises has suffered losses for 3 consecutive quarters, especially in the Eastern Division. Coincidentally, the very division under your management. Andrew's hands clenched tightly on the table. "You're trying to pin this on me?" I tilted my head slightly, my gaze razor-sharp. "I don't have to try, Andrew, the numbers speak for themselves." A board member cleared his throat, eyes darting away. We need to discuss the company's financial situation." I nodded, not giving Andrew a chance to interrupt. "Discussion is a great idea. Let's talk about how Andrew managed to lose over $200 million in less than a year." The board murmured. Calmly, I pulled out a second set of documents and flipped to the key page. And not just that, according to the internal audit, Andrew has funneled more than $5 million from company funds into personal expenses. A mansion in Miami, a yacht, first-class flights to Europe, and let's not forget the rather interesting expenditure for a nightclub in Vegas. The CFO slammed a hand on the table. "Is this true?" Andrew tried to keep his face neutral, but I could see him unraveling. "I'm the vice president. I have the right to use company funds for client entertainment." I held his gaze. "Entertaining clients with VIP passes to a nightclub? Very creative." A soft chuckle came from the board. I saw the veins in Andrew's neck tightening. He was about to snap. He slammed his hands on the table and shot to his feet. "You think you can kick me out of this company? This is my family's business." Slowly I stood as well, my eyes unwavering. "You're mistaken, Andrew. This is my company now." I slid another stack of documents toward the board. "I am now the majority shareholder, holding 52% of Carter Enterprises. That gives me full authority over executive decisions." The room fell into stunned silence. A few board members exchanged glances, then, nods of quiet agreement. Andrew shook his head, grasping at his last thread of hope. "Dad won't let this happen." I shrugged, my voice calm but ice-cold. "Only Longer has a say, and even if he did, I'm far beyond his reach now." His face drained of color, his breathing quick and uneven. I met his gaze, my words sharp as steel. "Andrew Carter, you are officially terminated from your position as Vice President of Carter Enterprises, effective immediately." The room plunged into absolute silence. Andrew opened his mouth to protest, but not a single board member spoke up in his defense. His eyes darted around, panic setting in as he realized there was no one left to save him. I turned toward the security team waiting by the door. "Please, escort him out." 2 security guards stepped forward. Andrew yanked his hands away from the table, but he knew he was powerless. He turned to me, his voice strangled with rage and desperation. "You're going to regret this, Isabella." I crossed my arms, offering him nothing but a cold, knowing smile. "Maybe, but before I regret it, make sure you've packed your things." He glared at me with pure hatred, then turned and walked away, his footsteps heavy as if dragging the weight of a crumbling empire. The door closed behind him. I exhaled slowly, the taste of victory spreading through me. The board remained motionless, as if they had just witnessed a hurricane tear through the room. I sat down, placing my hands on the table deliberately. "Now then," I said, my voice firm, razor-sharp. "Let's talk about the future of Carter Enterprises." For a moment, silence hung in the air. Then, one by one, heads began to nod. I knew, from this moment on, I had won everything. I stood in the boardroom, staring at the door where Andrew had just been dragged out of Carter Enterprises. Out of my company. The thrill of victory still simmered in my chest, but I knew this battle wasn't over. My father wouldn't sit quietly. Richard Carter was not a man easily taken down. I had seen him destroy those who dared to stand against him. And now, I was the one who had just taken down his golden son. I turned to Jacob, who had been silently observing the meeting from start to finish. "How much time do we have?" Jacob smirked, his eyes sharp. "Not long, I just got word from the lawyers. Richard has officially filed a lawsuit." I let out a dry chuckle. I had been expecting this. "What are the charges?" Jacob pulled out a stack of documents and set them in front of me. "He's accusing you of insider trading, claiming you used privileged information to illegally acquire shares." I flipped through the pages, scanning the bold printed allegations that read like a declaration of war. I smirked. "He really thinks this will stop me?" Jacob crossed his arms, nodding slowly. "No, he doesn't think he can win. But winning isn't the point." I knew that. Richard's goal was to drag the case out, entangle me in years of legal battles, tarnish my reputation with the board, and create enough instability to turn shareholders against me. An old trick. The problem was, I had prepared for this. I closed the file and leaned back in my chair. "Amy doesn't know I'm already a step ahead." Jacob raised an eyebrow. "You mean dissolving Carter Holdings?" I nodded. "Exactly. He thinks I'm still operating my assets through Carter Holdings, the old investment firm I built. But 3 days ago..." I slid another folder across the table toward Jacob. "I officially dissolved Carter Holdings. Every asset, every share I own, has already been transferred to a new entity, Imperium Capital." Jacob flipped through the pages quickly, then let out a low chuckle. "Smart. That means any documents Richard has on Carter Holdings are useless." Precisely. Richard had built his lawsuit around my old financial structure. But the problem was, that structure no longer existed. He could sue Carter Holdings all he wanted, except Carter Holdings no longer controlled anything. I had moved everything beyond his reach. Jacob scoffed, leaning back in his chair. "I bet Richard is losing his mind right now." I smirked. "We'll see soon enough." That night, as I stood on my apartment balcony, sipping a glass of red wine, my phone rang. Richard's number. I let it ring 3 times before answering. "Isabella." His voice was cold as steel, stripped of the arrogance he once carried. "Hello, Father." I took another sip of wine, my voice calm. "You think you can take me down like this?" I let out a quiet chuckle. "I don't think, Father, I did." A heavy silence. I could almost hear his sharp, uneven breathing on the other end. "How long have you been planning this?" "Since the day you refused to let me into the company." A scoff came from the other end, but this time, there was no confidence behind it. "You think you've won, daughter?" "No." I placed my glass down on the glass table, my gaze fixed on the glittering Manhattan skyline. "I haven't just won. I've taken back what was mine." "I won't stop." Richard's voice hardened. "I'll fight this lawsuit. I'll find a way to regain control." I didn't waver. "You can try. But no one knows better than you that you lost your power a long time ago." He didn't respond immediately, but I knew I was right. "If you were still in control, you wouldn't be calling me tonight." Silence. Long. Heavy. I could almost picture his face, his eyes burning with fury, bitterness, and helplessness. Finally he spoke, his voice low and sharp as a blade. "You really are my daughter." I smirked. "That's the only thing you can take pride in about me." I ended the call. Below, the city lights glittered, as if nothing had changed. But I knew. Richard Carter's entire world had collapsed in a single night. I knew Andrew wouldn't go down without a fight. He had never faced failure before. He had lived his entire life under our father's protection, spending money recklessly without a care in the world. But today, he had nothing left to cling to. I left the office after my meeting with the board, but I kept a close watch on his every move. I knew he would try to turn the tables. Of course. I had already anticipated it. 2 days after his termination, Andrew suddenly stormed back into Carter Enterprises. He no longer looked like a powerful vice president. His hair was disheveled, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. He barged straight into my office, no knock, no hesitation. "You think this is over, Isabella?" I lifted my gaze, unfazed. "You still haven't learned your lesson, Andrew." He slammed a stack of documents onto my desk, his face twisted with rage. "I contacted some loyal shareholders. I can apply pressure to get my position back." I scoffed, pushing the stack of documents aside as if they were worthless. "Which shareholders? The ones who benefited from your shady business deals?" Leaning back, I locked my cold gaze onto him. "Do you really think I just sat here, waiting for you to strike back without preparing?" Andrew hesitated slightly. I pulled another file from my drawer and tossed it onto the table in front of him. "I ordered a full financial audit the moment I took over the company." His body stiffened, his eyes flickering with unease. "And guess what?" I continued, my voice razor sharp. "You left a trail, everywhere." Andrew flipped open the file, his face turning pale as he scanned the contents. $5 million for a beachfront mansion? $2 million for a yacht? $500,000 poured into high-end nightclubs? And this? This is just the tip of the iceberg. He swallowed hard, his hands trembling. This can't be official evidence." I met his eyes, unwavering. "I've already sent the full report to the SEC." Andrew inhaled sharply, his entire body tensing. "You're joking." "No. And under federal law, embezzlement of funds from a publicly traded company is a serious crime. The penalty? Anywhere from 5 to 20 years in prison." A bead of sweat rolled down his temple. I smiled. Calm, yet deadly. "You've lost everything, Andrew." He shot up from his chair, panic flooding his face. "I can negotiate. We can find a way to fix this." I crossed my arms, shaking my head slowly. "No, Andrew. I don't negotiate with someone who drained company funds to fuel his extravagant lifestyle." The boardroom door swung open forcefully. 2 SEC agents stepped inside, their expressions cold and unreadable. "Mr. Andrew Carter?" Andrew spun around, his face drained of color. "We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of embezzlement and securities fraud." No, I can explain." The agents didn't listen. They cuffed him in front of the entire office staff. Andrew thrashed. Dad won't let this happen, he'll save me." I stared at him, my gaze sharp as a blade. "You think Dad will save you?" Andrew froze, eyes widening. Right at that moment, my phone rang. The name on the screen. Richard Carter. I put it on speaker for everyone to hear. Richard's voice was calm, devoid of emotion. "I'm not going to do anything, Andrew." Andrew stood in stunned silence. "Dad, you can." Richard sighed. "You've caused too much trouble. Now you have to deal with the consequences." Andrew let out a choked, desperate sound. "Dad, I'm your son. I'm the heir to this family." Richard let out a cold, bitter laugh. "No, Andrew, you were just a mistake." The call ended abruptly. Andrew stopped struggling. He stood there, handcuffed, betrayed by the very man he had worshipped his entire life. I stepped closer, leaning in to whisper in his ear. "You've lost, and this time, no one can save you." He turned to me, his eyes burning with hatred. "You'll pay for this, Isabella." I simply shrugged. "Good luck in prison, Andrew." He was escorted out of the office, every employee's eyes locked onto the scene. I stood still, head held high. Andrew had built his entire life on wealth, power, and our father's protection. But today, he lost everything. And me? I was still standing, untouchable. The boardroom remained frozen in shock. Andrew Carter, the so-called rightful heir of this company, had just been let out in handcuffs, with no one left to save him. I stood in the center of the room, absorbing the tense atmosphere. Some board members darted nervous glances at me, while others hastily flipped through the documents on the table, searching for an escape route. But there was none. I slowly swept my gaze over them, my voice sharp, yet unhurried. "I believe it's time we make some official changes." No one objected. One of the CFOs cleared his throat, struggling to compose himself. Miss Isabella, as the majority shareholder, do you have a nomination for the position of chairman of the board? I placed both hands on the table, steady and commanding. There's no need for discussion. I will take that position. A few exchanged glances, but not a single person opposed me. They had seen what happened to those who stood on the wrong side. In just 10 minutes, the votes were cast and signed. I was officially named chairwoman of Carter Enterprises. At last, this company was entirely mine. As I left the boardroom, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced at the screen. Richard Carter. Knife. I didn't rush to answer. I let it ring 3 times, savoring every second he was forced to wait. Then, I picked up. What is it, Father? Richard's voice was low, stripped of its usual arrogance. You think you've won, Isabella? I smirked, my eyes tracing the glowing streets of New York below. No. I haven't just won, I've taken back everything. Silence? I could picture his face. A man who once held absolute power, now watching everything crumble before him. Andrew destroyed this family, Richard muttered, his voice cold. I let out a quiet laugh. No, you destroyed it a long time ago. A sharp breath on the other end. But no denial. I pulled the phone away from my ear, ready to hang up. This time, Father, you have no more moves left to play. And with that, I ended the call. Richard Carter was powerless. And I had just risen to the top. That night I returned to my penthouse, a place no one in my family had ever set foot in. It sat on the 70th floor of a towering skyscraper, overlooking the entire city. Every piece of furniture was flawless. Just like every detail of my decade-long plan. Jacob was already there, 2 glasses of champagne waiting on the table. He watched me, his eyes filled with something I rarely saw in others. Respect. So, you finally did it, he said. I picked up my glass, swirling the golden liquid inside the crystal. Not just did it, I clinked my glass against his, my voice a quiet but unwavering declaration. I took back everything. Jacob chuckled, shaking his head. I have to admit, this was one of the most brilliant takeovers I've ever witnessed. I took a slow sip, my eyes locked onto the city lights flickering below. Everything the Carter family once owned now belonged to me. I was no longer the girl I once was, the one who stood outside my father's office, begging for a chance. Now I was the one in power. Jacob set his glass down, crossing his arms. So what now? You've taken the company, you've taken down your father and Andrew. Do you really think this is the end? I looked at him, a sharp glint flashing in my eyes. There's still one more thing I need to finish. Jacob blinked, then let out a quiet chuckle. Richard Carter? I nodded slowly. He's lost everything, but I want to make sure he never rises again. Pulling out my phone, I scrolled through my contacts. A name appeared on the screen. Someone who could help me end Richard Carter's career for good. I pressed call. We have work to do. Jacob sat back, watching me with a knowing smile. I set my champagne glass down, my eyes gleaming like a wolf ready to hunt. This game wasn't over yet. I hadn't erased Richard Carter from this world completely. But trust me, that day was coming very soon. Isabella Carter's story is more than just a tale of revenge, it's proof of the power of perseverance, strategy and determination. In a world where power is often handed down through connections, rather than earned through merit, Isabella proved that true success isn't about privilege. It's about intelligence and resilience. Life works the same way. You may be underestimated, cast aside, or even betrayed. But if you learn to seize opportunities, calculate every move, and refuse to give up, the day you win will come. And when it does, no one will be able to stop you. What do you think about Isabella Carter's story? Has she truly won, or are there still challenges ahead? Share your thoughts, and don't forget to follow the channel for more stories on life, family, and the hard-earned lessons that come from the most complicated relationships. I used to believe that if I was good enough, if I tried hard enough, then one day my parents would finally see me. But I was wrong. So wrong that now, looking back, I want to burst out laughing in the middle of the night. The night my brother got the keys to his very first house, while I stood quietly in the corner with a cheap cupcake in my hand. No candles, no congratulations, no one asked how I felt, they just said, "Anna, can you take a few pictures for us?" Ever since I was old enough to notice the difference, I knew I was the one behind the scenes of my own life. My brother's name is Liam. The golden boy. The pride of the family. Everything about Liam was shiny, brand new, and perfectly model child material. I was the opposite. From birthdays and holidays to parent-teacher meetings, I was always the tag-along. Liam's little sister, never just me. I still vividly remember Christmas when I was 8. Liam got a brand new Nintendo Switch, exactly the one he'd wanted all year. I opened my present and found a gray hoodie, size L, with the logo of a local HVAC company. Still had the 40% off clearance sticker on it. It was so big I was practically swimming in it. Mom laughed and said, "This one will last you a while. Besides, you look cute in it." I nodded, forced a smile, and turned away to hide my burning eyes. That was the pattern that repeated throughout my childhood. When Liam turned 16, my parents gave him a shiny red Ford Fusion with a giant bow on the hood. They called it a well-deserved reward for a good, hard-working son. Me? I got an old bike from the neighbor, with a flat-back tire and a handlebar that tilted to one side. When I looked surprised, Dad just said, "Riding a bike is the best way to stay healthy, Anna." I didn't say anything, I just kept pedaling that bike to school every day, even in the freezing rain. I can't remember the last time I had a proper birthday. But I remember Liam's 18th perfectly. My parents rented a fancy Italian restaurant, invited nearly 50 guests, had a 2-tier cake, and even hired a live band. My own 18th birthday? A simple dinner at home with frozen lasagna Mom microwaved. She laughed and said, "I was too busy to prepare anything, but lasagna's good enough. You don't need all that fancy stuff like Liam." I nodded like I always did. That same quiet nod to keep dinner from getting awkward. We lived in a middle-class neighborhood in the suburbs of Ohio, in a beige 2-story house with a white picket fence around the yard. There was a little wooden sign on the lawn that read, "Family is everything." But to me, it was a framed lie. In the kitchen, Mom would always be fussing over some new Pinterest recipe. Dad loved grilling outside, especially on weekends when Liam's friends came over. They'd jump into the neighbor's pool, which we borrowed, while I was assigned to cut salad, set the table, and clean up afterward. "Anna's so helpful, always supporting her brother. You're a real team player, you know that?" Dad would say as he handed me a cheap soda can. Every time I looked at the photos of Liam in the living room. Graduation pictures. Photos with his car, his sports trophies, standing with Mom and Dad. I felt my chest tighten. And me? Not a single photo of just me. If I was in one, it was as background to Liam's smile. When it came time for college, Liam had everything paid for: tuition, housing, textbooks, not a thing missing. "He needs to focus on studying, so of course we support him," Mom said. And me? I had to fill out financial aid forms myself, work part-time at the campus library, and even sell old textbooks to cover tuition. But I never complained, I was used to it. I used to think maybe I was just being too sensitive. That maybe my parents had their reasons. That as the youngest I was supposed to be more understanding. But the older I got, the more I saw the blatant favoritism for what it was. I wasn't being loved equally, it wasn't a feeling, it was a fact. And then came my college graduation. I didn't expect a big party like Liam's, but I hoped, at least for a decent meal, a proper congratulation. Instead, they took me to a mediocre burger joint, rushed through dinner, and shoved a thin white envelope into my hand. I opened it. Inside was a $3 scratch-off lottery ticket. "We thought this would be fun," Mom beamed. "Hey, you might hit the jackpot," Dad added. like it was some poorly timed joke. I looked at them, looked around the table. No cake, no gift, no card, just that lottery ticket lying alone in my hand, a symbol of how little they really expected from me. I laughed. But it was the kind of laugh that catches in your throat, a sound almost like a sob. I held up the ticket and said, "So I guess this is my only shot at getting something worthwhile from this family, huh?" No one disagreed, no one responded, and no one met my eyes. From that moment on, I knew I had to wake up. No more clinging to a family that only remembered my name when they needed someone to do the dishes. But I had no idea where my life was headed. Until that scratch-off ticket, which felt like a cruel joke, ended up changing everything. I brought the ticket home in a torn wallet. The only thing I still had from high school. My apartment was on the third floor of an old building in Columbus, Ohio. One corner of the window was cracked, and the heater squealed like a trapped soul. I lived with a mouse I temporarily named Rick, because at least he remembered me every day. I tossed the ticket on the kitchen table, right next to a pile of unpaid electric bills and 2 packs of instant chicken noodles. It lay there, its dull shimmer under the dim yellow light. Part of me wanted to tear it to pieces, to burn it to ashes. But I didn't. I let it sit there as undeniable proof that I had never been a priority in that family. After a dinner of plain noodles and an expired can of soda, I curled up on an old chair passed down from a former classmate. I stared at the ticket. My graduation gift. While Liam, my brother, got a $210,000 house in the suburbs with a garden, a white picket fence, and his own garage, I got $3 worth of false hope. I remember that dinner like a lucid nightmare. Mom sat across from me, beaming like she had just given me the greatest gift. "You should be grateful. Who knows, maybe you'll become a millionaire," she said, stuffing extra ketchup packets into my bag like they were bonus gifts. Dad was busy texting someone, not even looking up. "We had to borrow more money to help Liam buy that house. You should understand," he said flatly, when I asked if they could help pay off some of my student loans. I let out a dry laugh, a hollow sound that chilled even me. After that day, I wasn't just the shadow in the family anymore. I was the one who disappeared. From every dinner, every family group chat, every birthday call. I got a full-time job at a local marketing firm, writing content for small businesses. In the morning, I wrote ads for cleaning services, nail salons, and Italian restaurants. At night, I picked up shifts at a late-night diner serving burgers, cleaning tables, and enduring awkward flirting from drunk customers. Every day, I walked 4 blocks back to my apartment. A place where no one was waiting for me. But at least it was mine. Not Liam's. Not my parents'. Friends used to ask why I didn't cut them off completely. Honestly, I didn't know. Maybe somewhere deep inside, I still held onto a sliver of hope that one day, Mom would knock on my door, hug me tight, and say, "I'm sorry, Anna. I was wrong." But that never happened. Instead, the only thing I got from her were forwarded emails with titles like, "10 Signs You're a Selfish Person," or, "Family is Everything, Appreciate Them Before It's Too Late." I didn't reply. I just hit delete and went back to my unpaid bills. Liam still sent the occasional message like, "Can you help me move some patio chairs this weekend?" Or, "Amanda wants to change the kitchen colors. Do you think ash gray or cream looks better?" I used to want to scream, "I have my own life, I'm not your free interior design assistant." But instead I just typed, "Busy, sorry," and deleted the chat. There was one time I went to Liam's house, more like got pressured into it, for his 30th birthday party. Mom threw a big celebration with karaoke, a buffet, and over 60 guests. I showed up late, stood in the corner of the yard with a beer and a cupcake. No one asked what I did, where I lived, or if I had someone in my life. I was background, a decoration no one noticed. That night, I went home and lay on my old mattress, staring at the peeling ceiling. How far had I come from where I started? The answer? Not far enough. I cleaned my kitchen one boring Sunday night, swept the floor, scrubbed the sink, tossed out old newspapers, and then I found the lottery ticket again. It was buried in a drawer next to a rusty pair of scissors and a ripped roll of tape. I picked it up. The silver coating was still intact. I stared at it so long I lost track of time. My hands trembled as I read the faded print. Match 3 symbols to win up to $10 million. I set it back down on the table. It was just paper. But somehow, it felt as heavy as all the anger I'd been carrying. I didn't scratch it, I left it alone. Because if I scratched it and didn't win anything, then all I'd be left with was the truth. I was still that same forgotten, broke, left behind Anna. But if I left it untouched, I still had a shred of illusion, a chance however slim, that life could change. Sometimes, a dream is worth more than a broken reality. I went to bed with the tickets still on the table like a dagger under my pillow. I dreamed I walked into Liam's living room, held up the ticket, and said, "I won, you don't get to look down on me anymore." And then I laughed in my dream. Laughed so hard it hurt. The next morning, I woke up at 5:30 as usual, made cheap coffee, put on my second-hand coat, and headed out to the bus stop. A new day began, with the same boring job, fake coworkers, and grumpy clients. The lottery ticket still sat on the table. I wasn't ready to face the truth, whether it was hope or disappointment. But I knew one thing for sure. I had started to pull away from the universe called family. And I wasn't going back. Whether I won or not, I was no longer the Anna who silently endured everything. I was stepping out of someone else's shadow. And for the first time, that shadow was mine. I didn't find out Liam was engaged through a call, or even a check-in message. I found out from a photo in the family group chat. The one I muted months ago. In the photo, Liam was kneeling in the middle of a vibrant flower garden, holding up a chestnut-sized ring in front of Amanda, his girlfriend of the past 2 years. She was sobbing, and my parents stood behind them, smiling as if they had just witnessed the most miraculous thing on earth. Below the photo was a caption from my mother. "He proposed, we have a new daughter-in-law, so proud of my son." Proud? That word had never been used for me. I stared at the screen, not quite sure why my heart felt like it was tightening. It wasn't because Liam was getting attention. I was used to that. It was because, I realized, I wasn't even surprised. As if everything in my life, no matter how bitter, had already been written. And I was just rereading a script someone else had written for me. About 2 weeks later, I got a call from Mom. "Anna, we're throwing an engagement party for Liam and Amanda at the end of this month. Make sure you come, okay?" "I'm working both shifts, Mom. It's going to be hard to manage." "Oh, come on. It's not every day we have a special event like this. I already booked the restaurant and invited over 80 people. Even your dad's relatives from Pennsylvania are coming." I bit my lip. 80 people for an engagement party? I graduated college with honors, and didn't even have 8 people at dinner. "I'll try to make it," I said. An old habit I hadn't shaken. Pleasing others. Even when I felt empty. The party was held at an upscale restaurant downtown. The same place I used to stare into through the glass, wishing I could be a guest inside instead of a waitress. That day, I wore a plum-colored dress I bought on sale last season, tied my hair back neatly, and slipped on a pair of heels with worn-out soles. As I stepped in, the room filled with soft jazz music, warm golden lights, and cheerful faces chatting away. I felt like a background character who had walked into the wrong scene. Liam stood in the center of the room, holding Amanda in his arms. Both wore white, like a royal couple about to ascend the throne. My parents stood beside them, champagne flutes in hand, their smiles never leaving their faces. No one noticed I had arrived, not a single person. I made my way around the room, poured myself a glass of water, and found a quiet corner to sit in. Every conversation around me shared the same theme. "Liam's doing so well. Amanda is such a sweetheart. The wedding will be absolutely magical." A cousin sitting nearby whispered to someone next to her. "Liam's so lucky, his parents are covering everything, the restaurant, the honeymoon, I heard they're going to the Maldives. I almost choked on my water. The Maldives? I'd never even had enough money to leave the state. A wave rose inside me. Not jealousy, but disgust. Disgust at the fake sense of fairness my family always preached, only to throw me aside when it mattered most. As the party neared its end, I decided to leave early, but Mom caught me before I could slip out. "Anna, I was looking for you. Why were you sitting somewhere no one could see you?" I forced a smile. "Well, you were busy being the center of the universe. I didn't want to steal the spotlight." She laughed, but there was a flicker of caution in her eyes. "So what did you think of the party?" she asked, her voice full of hopeful anticipation. "Grand." "Very Liam," I replied, unable to hide the bitterness in my tone. She paused, then spoke like she was delivering a lesson. "You should be happy for your brother. He deserves all of this. He's worked so hard." I squinted slightly. "And what about me?" She tilted her head, as if she didn't understand the question. "I mean, when I graduated, no one threw a party, no one asked me what I needed. I got a lottery ticket, Mom, $3. She laughed lightly, as if I were joking. "You think I forgot? We were tight on money back then, after buying Liam's house. But you were fine. You're strong. You're independent." I nodded, my eyes felt like stone. "And now? You're paying for Liam's wedding, the honeymoon. What's next? A second house? A retirement account?" Mom started to look irritated. "Anna, no one's stopping you from working harder. If you want what Liam has, you need to earn it." I let out a dry, humorless laugh. "I'm working 2 jobs, Mom. I wake up at 5 a.m. and come home past midnight. What you call not trying hard enough is my real life." She pressed her lips together. "Your tone is very disrespectful." I stepped back, the smile still on my face. "I respect the truth, you don't." I turned and walked away, leaving my mother standing there amid the music and clinking glasses, just as out of place as I had been when I arrived. On the way home, I pulled over at a quiet gas station, wondering how far I had really come, and whether I could ever turn back. I thought about the lottery ticket still lying in the kitchen drawer. I had never scratched it. It was still intact, like a line drawn between forever broke and change your destiny. I looked up at the night sky. No stars, just flickering streetlights like tired heartbeats. But somewhere inside me something broke. Not with pain, but with release. I didn't need a party. I didn't need congratulations. I didn't need validation from a family that had never truly seen me. I needed myself. I don't know what made me pick up that lottery ticket that day. Maybe it was the urge to end it all, to break free from the joke called family. Or maybe it was just a random impulse on a gray day without sunlight. That day was a Saturday. I had just gotten home after a 10-hour shift at the diner. The smell of grease clung to my hair. My hands were burning from the industrial dish soap. The apartment was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. I opened the kitchen drawer, the one where I kept everything I didn't want to see. Unpaid bills, junk mail, single socks without a pair, and that lottery ticket. I stared at it like I was facing an old wound that hadn't healed. After a few seconds of hesitation, I pulled out my phone and entered the numbers from the ticket into the official Ohio State Lottery website. The screen lit up. I typed in each number, my hands trembling like I was holding a knife. 8, 15, 27, 34, 42, 56. I hit the check button. Waited. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it might burst. The result appeared in just 2 seconds, but to me, time stopped. "Congratulations, you've won the jackpot, $195 million. I didn't scream, I didn't jump. I just stood there, staring at the screen like someone who couldn't believe they were still alive. After a few seconds, I sank to the floor, my back against the cabinet, hands on my head, trying to breathe, so I wouldn't pass out. A laugh slipped out of my mouth, dry, twisted. A $3 ticket. And I had just become a millionaire. I didn't tell anyone. Not my mom, not Liam, not my coworkers, not even my best friend. I spent the whole night researching what to do if you win the lottery. The first answer: tell no one. The next morning, I called an independent financial advisor with an office in the suburbs. I chose her because of her 5-star reviews and a profile photo with a sincere smile. Her name was Carol Landry, probably in her 50s, sharp eyes and a voice that instantly made you feel safe. When I walked into her office, I was still shaking. Carol looked at me like she'd seen 100 people like me. People whose minds were being threatened by a number too big to grasp. "First of all," she said after hearing my story, "you cannot tell anyone about this. Second, we're going to set up a limited liability company, an LLC, to receive the money on your behalf. That way, your identity stays anonymous to the public." "What about taxes?" I asked. "After taxes and mandatory deductions, you'll have about $125 million. I swallowed hard. $125 million. A number so big, I couldn't even wrap my head around it. I used to pinch every dollar for gas, every penny for instant noodles. Now, I could buy an entire neighborhood. Carol helped me set up a long-term financial plan. We opened secure investment accounts, created some savings holdings, and, most importantly, I wasn't allowed to spend extravagantly for at least 6 months. I followed every word she said like an obedient student. She also told me to avoid doing anything that would draw attention. I nodded. I knew better than anyone. If my mother ever found out, she wouldn't waste a second before calling me her pride and joy. Liam would probably pitch some startup investment idea and demand to be CEO. I guarded that secret like it was a weapon. No one could know. No one had the right. The first thing I did was pay off my student loans. Clean, final. One click erased 4 years of struggle and sleepless nights. I cried when I got the confirmation email. "Your loan balance has been paid in full." Then I quit the diner job without notice. I left an envelope with $5,000 for Linda, the manager, and a handwritten note. "Thank you for being kind to me when the world wasn't." I bought a black Audi Q5, leather interior, nothing flashy but incredibly refined. When I sat behind the wheel, I felt like a different person, no longer the girl hunched over dirty dishes, but someone in control of her own life. I still went to work at the marketing company, but I didn't tell anyone about the change. I moved out of my old apartment and rented a small villa in the western suburbs. White walls, stone-paved porch, a garden full of lavender. I didn't throw parties, didn't post on social media, didn't share a single bragging photo. I just sat on the balcony each morning with a hot cup of coffee, listening to the birds and the wind rustling through the trees. Freedom, it was real. I opened a new bank account, reset everything to be more private. All of it was done in silence. My family had no idea. They still thought I was living in some rundown apartment, struggling with 2 jobs. And I let them believe that. Because I didn't need them. I didn't need pitying looks or hypocritical advice. One afternoon when Liam texted, "Hey, are you free to help me pick a sofa for the new living room?" I looked at the screen and turned off my phone. No reply, no apology. I was no longer the same Anna, the girl sitting quietly at someone else's party, holding a glass of water and forcing a smile. I was me. A woman who had learned the most valuable lesson: never wait for others to recognize your worth. Create it and protect it. But I also knew, every secret has an expiration date. And when my family found out I was no longer poor Anna, the storm would come. I was ready. And I swore, this time, I wouldn't back down. I knew they would come back. Not because they missed me. Not because they loved me. But because they smelled money. It all started with a random Facebook post from an old friend. In the photo, I was standing next to my new Aldi, holding a coffee cup outside a fancy cafe in the suburbs. I didn't tag anyone, didn't comment, didn't share. But algorithms don't keep secrets. And my mom never missed a chance to snoop. 3 days later she called. "Anna, how have you been lately? I heard you moved. Got a new car, huh? I almost choked on my coffee. Her voice was unusually sweet, the kind of soft that only appeared when she wanted something. It's nothing special, Mom. I just moved somewhere quieter. Oh, I also heard it's close to Liam's place. What a coincidence, huh? I stayed silent. She kept laughing. How about you come over for dinner this Sunday? The whole family misses you. I said yes. Not because I wanted to see them, but because I wanted to see what roles they'd play. Liam's house hadn't changed much. Neatly trimmed lawn, yellow fairy lights along the porch, and that suffocatingly sweet air freshener smell. I walked in, carrying a bottle of wine. Just expensive enough not to be looked down on, just cheap enough not to be flashy. Anna, you look so different, my mom exclaimed, hugging me like we had just reunited after a world war. Liam came out from the kitchen wearing a white polo, smiling like nothing had ever happened between us. There she is, check out the new sofa, what do you think? I nodded. Looks big. We sat down at the table. My dad was carving roast beef, watching me like a tax inspector eyeing his biggest case yet. Dinner passed with dull stories about the upcoming wedding, tablecloth colors, outdoor photo locations, and how the budget keeps growing. I ate in silence, forcing down tough steak, trying not to lose my temper. I knew the punch was coming. It just hadn't landed yet. It wasn't until the third dinner I agreed to that they finally got to the point. My mom ladled more soup into my bowl, her gaze as sweet as burnt sugar. Anna, I'm really so proud that you've settled down. New car, new place, living independently. That's what I always hoped for you. I nearly laughed. Hoped? She once gave me a clearance hoodie for my birthday. Thanks, Mom, I said flatly. Liam cleared his throat, then slid a stack of papers across the table toward me. We're planning to expand the house a little. Amanda wants her own yoga room, and I could use a bigger garage for another car, you know? Making space for family. I flipped through it. Floor plans. Construction cost breakdown. Total, $78,000. At the bottom, a note. If possible, please add $22,000 to help cover the wedding budget. Overage. It's a good investment, Liam said, flashing a confident smile like he'd just closed a deal with a bank. I set the papers down. Gently. Very gently. My mom chimed in. It'd be great if you could help, after all. You're doing pretty well these days, aren't you? I looked at her. Doing well thanks to the $3 you gave me on graduation day. The room went still. My dad sniffed. Liam looked away. My mom tried to hold on to her smile. Back then the family was struggling, you know that. I nodded. I know, down to the details. I know Liam got a car at 16. I know he had a scholarship and still got his tuition paid by you. I know he had his engagement party at a 5-star restaurant while I had frozen lasagna. I know when I asked if you could help me pay down some of my student loans, you told me, try harder. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut like a blade through the glossy paint they were trying to smear over this dinner. And now that I have a little success, suddenly, you're proud of me? Because I might be able to pay for Liam's new garage? My mom started crying. The kind of tears you shed when you're playing your part, right? Anna, I just want us to be close again. I know I made mistakes. But you can't live your whole life in resentment. I stood up, pushing the chair back. I live in truth, not resentment. I grabbed my bag and walked toward the door. Liam called after me. I think you should know how to share. We're family after all. I turned around and smiled. No one's stopping you from working harder, Liam. Then I left, leaving behind the people who only called me family when they needed money. On the way home, I rolled down the window and let the night air hit my face. I felt light, not because I said no to giving them money, but because, for the first time in my life, I said no to a role. I was no longer Anna, the girl standing in the corner taking graduation photos for Liam. No longer the one who got a lottery ticket as a gift. No longer the forgotten name on the engagement party guest list. For the first time, I had the right to say no. I blocked my mom's number. Blocked Liam's too. And when my dad tried calling from another number, I added that one to the block list without a second thought. Not because I was angry, not because I hated them. I was just done. Life after that night felt like stepping out of a smoke-filled room. I took a deep breath, felt the cool air hit my lungs, a feeling both strange and familiar. I no longer flinched at the sound of a phone ringing. No more wondering, are they calling to borrow money again, or, what do they want this time? I was truly living, not living to be seen. I moved to a new house in the northern suburbs, far from anyone who used to know me as Anna, the second child. The house had a black iron fence, a rose garden out front, and a reading room flooded with natural light. Every morning I woke up without an alarm. Made myself a latte with the Italian coffee machine in the kitchen. The one luxury I allowed myself after years of going without. I invested exactly as Carol, my financial advisor, had recommended. Blue chip stocks, rental properties, and a few promising tech startups. The money grew quietly and steadily. I didn't live like a millionaire. I just lived like someone who could finally breathe without being choked by obligation, expectation, or dismissal. No one knew I'd won the lottery. The neighbors thought I was a freelance marketing specialist working remotely. Old friends said I seemed stable and mature. Former coworkers guessed I'd inherited something from a rich aunt. I let them think whatever they wanted. The truth is, I didn't need anyone to believe in me anymore. That fall, I went to New Orleans to listen to jazz. In the winter, I traveled to Colorado, tried skiing, and nearly broke my neck because I stupidly didn't hire an instructor. In the spring, I took a painting class in Austin. And in the summer, I stayed home, read books, grew tomatoes in the backyard, and played piano just for myself. I started an anonymous blog to share my journey of freeing myself from family manipulation. Not to be famous, not to be praised. Just to have a space to release all the years I stayed silent until my throat felt raw. And then, one day, I saw Liam again. I was sitting at a small cafe downtown, laptop open, earbuds half plugged in, when that voice came from behind me. Anna? I turned around. Liam in a wrinkled shirt, dark circles under his eyes and messy hair. He no longer looked like America's golden boy. There was something in his eyes. Tired, confused, and just a bit bitter. I nodded. Liam. He pulled out a chair and sat down without asking. I didn't stop him. I didn't greet him either. I heard you made it big. I took a sip of coffee, eyes still on the screen. Did you? People say you won the lottery, he continued, his voice a mix of sarcasm and hesitation. I saw you driving an Audi, living in a fancy neighborhood, traveling. Don't you think you should share with the family? I closed my laptop, looked him straight in the eye. Family? Oh, you mean the people who handed me a $3 lottery ticket and told me to try harder? Liam gave a weak laugh. Well, everyone makes mistakes. But seriously. He leaned back, arms crossed, eyes cold like he was exposing me. You just got lucky. It's just winning the lottery. Nothing to be proud of. I smiled. Not angry, not hurt. Just smiled like I'd heard an old tired story. Maybe you're right, I said calmly. I got lucky with the ticket. But everything after that? Every dollar I kept. Every decision I made. Every person I chose not to forgive. That was all me. No one taught me how to survive in a family that treated me like a backup plan. No one showed me how to manage $85 million without losing my mind. And absolutely no one helped me step out of your shadow. He said nothing. I stood up, grabbed my bag, and gave him one final polite smile. Good luck with the rest. Then I walked away, leaving Liam sitting there, lost in a crowded cafe, no longer the center of attention for the first time in his life. That evening I stretched out on the armchair on my balcony and looked at the stars. The wind was gentle, the garden lights cast a warm glow on the grass. I played a soft jazz track, poured a glass of white wine, leaned back, and smiled. Well, I didn't need them anymore. Not their apologies, not their praise, not their delayed approval. I had myself, completely. My life used to be a stage where I was only a background character. Now I didn't need the stage. I was rewriting the script. I was the director. I was living, not for anyone else, just because I was worth it. And to me, that wasn't winning the lottery. That was freedom. My story isn't about money. It's about reclaiming my worth after years of being overlooked and forgotten. I used to think I needed my family's approval to feel seen, but in the end, the only thing I really needed was the courage to let go. Winning the lottery didn't change who I was. Having the strength to say no and live on my own terms. That was my greatest victory. The biggest lesson? No one gets to decide your worth, except you. What do you think about Anna's story and the bold choices she made? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more real and moving stories about life, family, and the journey to becoming who we truly are.